Welcome back to For the Love of Men podcast. My name is Courtney Shand, and I'm hosting with my dear friend Brianna Mosier.
Hey.
The intention of this show is to bring together men and women to create healthy, polarized relationship dynamics by learning how to honor each other's natural, masculine, and feminine energetic core. As always, I'm excited to talk about this today, but I want to introduce you to my friend Bri and myself, and we are going to dive into some really great stuff about masculine energy.
You're going to love it. My work in the world, if you haven't heard me before, is empowering women to embrace their empowered feminine energy, heal long-standing emotional wounding, and open up to attract healthy, empowered masculine partners so they can eventually attract in the right person for them. Courtney?
My clientele. That's what I want. I have been working with men to really help them embody their masculine energy so that they can lead with clarity and confidence, especially in those early stages of dating, so that they can match with Bri's clientele.
And eventually we'll just have a mixer.
I love that idea. But we're super excited to get into the topic today. Without further ado, if you don't know who we are, go back and listen to former episodes. But we want to talk today about masculine energy at large. We talk a lot about healthy and wounded or toxic, kind of on a spectrum here, but we're going to break this down so that you have a little bit of nuance of what it looks like, feels like, how it expresses, how you'll know when you're in the presence of it, so that you can not only, if you're a woman, discern what type of energy you're around, and if you're a man, you can start to reflect on, oh, this is an area that I get to take a little bit more accountability for. Maybe this is an area I want to spend some time reflecting on or zooming in on, or even getting some support around so that you can show up more in that healthy camp. So,
and the payoff is so big because empowered feminine women love healthy masculine men. You have, not that you should do this for women, right? It's for you, but it is an added bonus that you open up to dating and interacting with an entirely different paradigm of people. If you want the most like playful, fun, warm, open-hearted, sensual, spiritual women, like goddess energy, being in that healthy masculine is going to be the way to do it. It also ripple affects your entire family line. You raise young men who are more empowered. You create beautiful, loving family units. I mean, this is really important, impactful ripple effect work. So, quick disclaimer. I know, it's so good. Quick disclaimer, when we talk about energy work, we're not referring to gender or gender roles. Sometimes Court and I will interchange men and women with masculine and feminine, but in a very nuanced way that applies to this episode. There's a difference between genders and gender roles and energy work. The way that we teach it, everyone has masculine and feminine energy, and the integration is what creates the healthiness, right? A woman without masculine energy is like an emotional puddle with no direction, losing herself, chaotic. She needs boundaries. She needs structure internally. For men, it's the same way. The masculine also needs integrated feminine, right? If he's just in his masculine, he's going to be lacking attunement skills and able to build emotional intimacy or even physical intimacy, I would argue. He's not going to be able to have as much connection. And so, among other things. So you need both. It's just energy work at the end of the day.
Yeah. I love that. So,
start us off.
Yeah, let's dive in. So when we were sitting here thinking of like how we would discern as women, how we've discerned in our experience what energy a man is operating from, we were taught kind of like things to look for that were so helpful. Obviously, this isn't going to encompass everything, but we have a little more granularity and nuance to it now than we did even when we recorded our most popular episode, which was episode 4, about wounded and healthy, empowered versus wounded masculine, I think is what it was called. So let's dive in with the healthy ones. Those are always so fun. When I am across from a healthy masculine energy, I can tell that he is able to honor his own limits, as opposed to a more wounded, or the term toxic is thrown around a lot, toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity, or even a man who's operating from a wounded masculine perspective, is going to often say no, not from a place of honoring his or someone else's limits, but from a place of like flexing power. Like, I'm just going to put you in your place and say no. I'm going to withhold or not give you what you need just so that you know that I'm kind of like above you in some capacity.
It's a power play.
Yeah, lots of power dynamic.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing in the toxic or wounded masculine category. There's usually a lot of emphasis on being the alpha or a hierarchy. And we say the same thing to women, by the way, I'll just say when I work with women, women who are thinking about like alpha female or hierarchy, I would say there's a wounded pattern in there we have to unpack, because really healthy, empowered people aren't thinking about hierarchy. They're thinking about supporting, uplifting each other, seeing each other, honoring other points of view. You're not concerned with, am I the top of the top? Am I the alpha, right? It's that underneath is showing typically where there's a wound around that person's feeling of enoughness internally,
Yeah. I always say whenever hierarchy is involved, you're in the wounded paradigm. If there is a hierarchy where you are starting to think someone is better than or worse than me, you're operating in a wounded space. Because empowered people are operating in the same plane. They're all like, oh, that's so neat. That's amazing. I want to get to know you because I see you as a person, as opposed to whoever you kind of like assign value to based on their merit or their qualifications or their finances or their educational status or marital status or whatever the thing is. If you're thinking about it from a hierarchical point of view, you can almost bet that you're in the wounded paradigm.
Oof, well said. Or if there's like a big focus on dominate or be in control or power, it's the same, like very much leaning wounded toxic masculine. Yeah.
Because
go on.
Because if there is a hierarchy, that means that you are motivated, and it's often from this deep like shame or anger to rise. You want to not be the lowest person. That's where we experience a lot of shame in our humanness, and in order to avoid that, you're going to try to do whatever it takes to get above other people, and that's usually where it comes out sideways. So
it's like survival energy.
Yes.
Which was always in the wounded camp.
Yep, survival energy for sure.
Totally. So with healthy masculine, something I notice a lot is really valuing other people's inputs and points of view. There's like a understanding of what's important to you. Okay, how do I account for all of this and then make a decision or lead in a way that accounts for how it impacts everybody?
Yeah. And I think that goes from, there's like a sense of safety, kind of the opposite of the hierarchy is a sense of safety. When you feel generally safe and not like your survival is on the line, and this may sound extreme, but I think if you really look and reflect on it, when you're operating as if something that's being taken away from will like annihilate you, it's going to activate that fight or flight response. And that's kind of what we're talking about with survival energy. If you're only operating from survival energy and not this like neutral sense of safety, you won't see other people's input as valuable because you are so focused. It's kind of this like tunnel vision that biologically happens when you're in that fight or flight state. And in order to kind of like allow there to be multiple views or multiple contributions, you have to be experiencing a certain amount of safety. And that's hallmark of an empowered or healthy integrated masculine energy, is that he can see things from like a wider lens. He's able to put himself back in orientation of like reality instead of this like warrior space, which is necessary. Sometimes the warrior archetype is what's needed, but it's coming from this like very honoring space of like the fight is needed right now, not like the fight is always needed, which is so nuanced, but it is actually being across from it. You can tell it's very palpable when a man is always in that kind of like fight response, as opposed to being able to discern, is that necessary right now?
Like a healthy masculine man is going to have internal security, safety, groundedness. So when he does bring out that warrior archetype, like you see it turn on versus, and it's a nice thing to watch. Did you see Courtney look at me like, I love that.
That protector energy is activated, and it is it's a good look.
Yeah, versus the wounded masculine. the warrior energy is, it's like constant, like life is a battle, you know, that's what it always feels like, that kind of pushing with no internal safety. It's like a chasing of it. But how it shows up as more rigid, control, power focused. So someone who's in their wounded masculine isn't going to lead with, I feel internally unsafe, therefore I'm striving to create safety. He's not going to say that. He's going to be like, alpha, I need to get on top. I need to achieve. I need to make more money because this will give me that feeling of enoughness or uh, like worthiness, you know, safety. I love the way you phrase this next one so much that I want to say it myself, but I'm not going to, because you need to be saying it because they're your words.
Oh.
Where we say wounded masculine is unwilling to be vulnerable, and healthy masculine protects what's vulnerable. Can you share what this means?
Yeah. The wounded masculine is unwilling to own his own vulnerability. He's not able to tolerate the fact that he is actually powerless in some capacity. And that's what's driving him to constantly be in battle, is this like outrunning or outfighting this feeling of being merely mortal. Whereas someone who's integrated and healthy in their emotional state is going to be able to use that same feeling of like, I am just a human. And there is always someone who is more vulnerable than me. I can use my strengths to protect the more vulnerable in this moment. And sometimes it's our own emotions. And he will set the boundary and say, hey, no, you don't get to talk to me that way. I'm going to walk away if this continues. And that can be that same warrior energy, but on his own behalf, if his emotions are the thing that is vulnerable in that moment. Otherwise, he realizes, and I don't want to say like a hierarchy again, but there is kind of like an order of vulnerability that he is aware of. And if he is feeling really empowered, he's going to be using his strengths in the protection or support or service of the thing that is perceived more vulnerable in that moment. The children, the emotional expression that's coming out, the creativity that he is witnessing, whatever it is, he can see it and put it back in perspective. Whereas someone who is more wounded or kind of that toxic masculinity is often drawn to this vulnerability in others because he won't own it himself. He's drawn to someone who is perceived as weaker or less than him because he can't see himself in that way, because it would kind of like cause his mind to glitch. And so it's kind of an ironic thing, because that will create a weird paradigm for, or a weird dynamic, which is very much Bree's zone of genius, where there's kind of this exploitation of vulnerability as opposed to really supporting and revering, treating vulnerability with reverence, treating it with the view of, this is a privilege that I'm getting to see this, and I'm therefore going to honor it, protect it, support it, provide for it what it needs, so that it will be able to flourish
and be stronger and more empowered and more uplifted. I find too with wounded masculine, it's more of a taking advantage of what is vulnerable.
Yes.
You know, it's more of like a seeking out vulnerable people to prey on or manipulate. Versus healthy masculine sees vulnerable people and goes, oh, let me use my strength to support and uplift you. And bring, because there's no hierarchy. So it's like, let me bring you up here. Let me support. What can I give? What can I provide? How can I be there? Healthy masculine has inherently quite a bit of, you know, we talk about provider energy. I would say it's generosity too. And it's generosity with all kinds of things, emotional support. It's not just financial. The way that it used to be, you know, however many years ago when this work was kind of blended with gender roles. Providership is about providing stability and holding emotional space, and yes, financial, and yes, you know, planning things like that, but it's a broader word. Especially sitting across from different masculine energies, I have, and I know you personally have too, sat across from very wounded masculine and very healthy masculine. The felt experience is so viscerally different as a woman. The way that I can tell when a man is internally safe and grounded, sure of himself, has that provider generosity energy, my entire body softens around him. It's like this is sturdy. I can lean on this.
Mm-hmm.
I can melt into this. This person can hold me. I could be vulnerable and he's going to catch me. It's like that's my man energy, like that's my rock. That's my pillar. He's got me. That is highly attractive to empowered women who want that space to melt, versus when you're around kind of wounded masculine or toxic masculine, the felt experience is, I need to protect myself because you're going to smush me. And I don't know what your intentions are. And I don't want to show you my vulnerabilities because I definitely have this feeling of like, I can't quite trust you. Like you're going to exploit it. The more empowered a woman is, the more she's going to pick up on those subtle felt experiences. Better said, the more she's going to trust what she's picking up on is true. Yeah.
So good.
What's the next one? Healthy versus wounded.
Oh, well, I think that kind of dovetails nicely into the fact that healthy, empowered people, when you are in your power, you naturally see and celebrate other people's strengths because it doesn't threaten yours. That it doesn't threaten the strength that I have that's unique to me if you have something different, because I see it from a plane that's neutral and level. I'm like, ooh, we could collaborate. This is how I think this will actually register for men, because this is how you are operating in the like relational space, is to build your team. If you're thinking about it from a healthy, integrated point of view where everyone is neutral and on the same playing field, you're building a team with what strengths you contribute. Everyone has their own strengths. I'm just looking for them and I'm celebrating them. And when you celebrate them, they naturally present themselves more. And that is, I think, hallmark of an empowered masculine man, is he is like easy to be around because he just sees you in a way that feels unique and special, and not from a way that you need to like prove or hustle to have him see you, which is
like
often more of the wounded camp. But it's just kind of like a neutral, like the more yourself you are, the more they're like, wow, that is so cool. That's amazing. They kind of have that ability to see people's strength. So
and their differences.
and differences.
And they're not intimidated by other people's strength. So because he's so sturdy on his own, he's not intimidated by the strength of other people. When they have unique things to offer, he can celebrate it, as Courtney's saying, because it doesn't threaten his own sense of power and safety. Because he has a sense of power and safety internally, other people's unique gifts are celebrated, uplifted, supported.
Which, this is such a great point for this caveat. This is kind of what's been on my heart lately for this, is that it is, when we talk about like doing the work, we both have worked with women and they're like, we want a man that's doing the work. And that can be this really like, what does that even mean? I don't even know. Doing the work, an example, very tangible example of doing the work, is when you do observe someone else's strength and it brings that like, I don't have that realization. What you do with that feeling of being able to reflect on, what is this experience for me? Is there a fear coming up? And how do I usually use and direct that fear? Am I wanting to like shut them down because it feels like for me to not have as much of that version of strength? Am I able to like recalibrate with the fact that I have these other strengths that the reality is that that person probably doesn't have, and we can work together and really either learn from your strengths to develop more of mine, or I can borrow this and we can work collaboratively. That is part of doing the work. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about partnership, is if you're wanting a partner, you actually will be stronger in some ways and the other person will be stronger in other ways. And your ability to navigate that feeling that comes up when you realize the difference that's there is part of doing your work.
Well said.
Yeah.
She said, right?
Yeah, that makes
Yes,
sense.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, go on.
Go for it.
No, you have more.
No, that was it.
All right.
Yeah.
With wounded masculine, I often find there's this energy of like bullying, forcing, pushing. I know it's so smushy, isn't it? It's like, I'm exhausted already. Whether that shows up, so sometimes with wounded masculine, you might see that in careers or hustle culture, like really overworking themselves, not respecting their own limits, push, 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 force, 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 or their agendas. They want to push, they want to force, they want to try to make it happen, strive for it, versus healthy masculine is going to lead himself and take action on those. But it's also going to be informed by his own limits and boundaries, right? And probably input from other people, versus wounded masculine tends to prey on the vulnerable and use that to bolster himself. It's very different. I hope you can see that nuance. Like we've been talking about, celebrates and uplifts versus kind of uses and takes advantage. So wounded masculine is a very push, force, shame-based, shaming other people as a way to get control. And a lot of folks don't know what that sounds like, I've learned. Like, it seems like the word shame is used often and people sometimes don't have the context for and the definition of what that looks like. So like using shame to control somebody is, what would be an example of this?
Negging.
Yeah,
Backhanded
negging
compliments.
would be like, you're weak. Don't you want to be an alpha male? You need to be stronger. You need to be tougher. You need to try harder. You're not actually as good as you think you are. You could be like me if you worked harder. It's like that's a shaming tactic that makes someone internally collapse and then strive to earn your approval, which is a manipulation tactic. So that's going to show up very often with wounded masculine, and he's probably going to choose vulnerable people because vulnerable people who are less sturdy internally are easier to manipulate.
Yeah. I always see this there have been some like coaches, sports coaches, just in having spoken with lots of people, men and women actually, I think have had this experience where they aren't looking out for your natural limits versus the healthy option of like seeing you as a person with limits, with limitations, with um, you know, strengths and weaknesses, kind of seeing you as a whole person versus like pushing you to be better, stronger, faster from this place of like, it doesn't matter, give it your all, everything or nothing. It's very like black and white, instead of seeing you as like, okay, this is the skill that's lacking and we want to really support this and really like fan the flame when you are doing good. And this is the area where you have some room to grow. That can be like healthy coaching. There's a healthy space for that where you are being bolstered and you leave feeling like, okay, clearly I have some work to do. We all do. We're all growing and evolving all the time. And I myself am not a bad person, sports player, whatever sport it is. Like you yourself are not bad. You have some room to grow, and it's like a hopeful, like a
Healthy
uplifting current. Yeah, there's an uplifting current to it as opposed to like, why bother? There's no hope here.
Totally. You could distill it down to shaming versus empowering.
Yeah.
Both create change, but one feels really terrible. And the other feels like, wow, I feel more capable and empowered around this person. Whoa, my weaknesses are getting stronger. Even though I am holding myself accountable, like I'm not perfect in these ways, I'm growing versus being shamed into growing, which will create, like the classic example is, the kid in high school whose dad forces him to like practice, try harder, you're not good enough. And then he grows up resenting his dad and not knowing his limits and believing he has to be the alpha to be good enough. Like that's where we see that toxic masculinity showing up.
Yeah.
You look excited about something?
There's a lot of them that are
What's
so
she
good.
gonna pick? What's she gonna pick?
I mean, I think this has to do with the fact that like if you see power and appearance as the superior as your kind of like ace card, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to do whatever it takes to be able to present in that way. And that's often going to be leading with shame. So people who have experienced that shaming tactic where they kind of feel smushed will often present as this like larger than life version of themselves, which is exhausting for them, and it's kind of exhausting depending on the, you know, the level at which they're operating in this space. But they never actually feel like they can let their guard down, like they can let people know them. And it's tough because there's layers to this and it's kind of like interlocking, so it's not going to be just like a one, you know, move this one piece and you'll be fixed sort of thing. But you actually will feel quite empty inside when you're operating from this space, because nothing ever gets in. The nourishment never actually makes it in if you aren't courageous enough to drop the guard with people who you do trust. So you don't develop the trust, first of all, and then you don't get what you need because you haven't actually developed the trust in which you would be able to let your guard down. You're always on guard, always defending, always protecting yourself from perceived weakness, perceived um, vulnerability, perceived misunderstanding. You are very sensitive to the way people perceive you. And so it's going to limit you in a lot of ways from experiencing a robust, full, socially connected life, but also the experiences of life that make life really meaningful. They're going to be kind of like muted and dull as opposed to vibrant and more uplifting.
Yeah, well said. It's like with wounded masculine, how do I say? With appearance focus, sometimes I find wounded masculine can come off very harsh, cold, disconnected, because they're posturing so much to want to appear as masculine. You know? They want to appear as strong, as tough, as this masculine energy, but it's coming from a place of proving, versus very healthy, empowered men have, quote unquote, done that work, right? Integrated those parts. And there's nothing to prove. Like, he's comfortable and confident in himself. And so he can show up and you feel his grounded, empowered presence because you feel his internal sturdiness with himself. Versus wounded masculine, you feel that they're striving to prove their masculinity, trying to like be top dog. The way that this might land for the men listening is, you know, when you meet a woman who is, you can feel that she's trying to prove that she's feminine or sexy and attractive. Like she's overdoing it. It's like her sexual energy is spilling because she wants the validation. She wants to be seen as desirable and beautiful and sexy and feminine. And so she's like, this isn't always a good example, but the idea of like the woman dancing on the table at the bar, you know, that kind of energy, that can often be what we call wounded feminine. And it's this like proving, chasing, seeking validation about that thing about herself. So wounded masculine often has a playing it big distortion. Like, I'm the big man on campus. I have it all together. And it's quite easy to spot as a woman. It's very easy to spot.
Ooh, go there.
It's not, it doesn't come across as empowered or like, wow. So, okay, here's what I'll say. When I was deeply in my wounded feminine, I was very attracted to wounded masculine. This like direction and gumption, and I'm strong and I have this like playing it big and I have the answers. But that was because I didn't have any of my own internal sturdiness and security. So I was looking for it in someone else. And I was drawn to that display. After healing, that is very easy to spot when a man is kind of, it's like a house of cards. There's not a real foundation for a house in there. There's not real groundedness and sturdiness, you know? It's an idea that he's trying to act as. Just as women do this too. When they're in their wounded feminine, they try to act more feminine and show up more sexy and like perform it. the more empowered someone is, the more they can discern the performance versus the embodied, true, healthy energy. Did that make sense? I feel like I talked around it.
I think so.
Okay.
I love it. Yeah. No, I think it's so important too, because this is where we started, was we wanted to talk about how we feel, how we can tell. And I would say being across from a man who's operating from this wounded masculine energy feels pushy is always the energy. Like it feels like if someone is like just pushing you, they're like, hey, let's go. Hey, let's go. Hey, what are you doing? Why are you not moving? And it just feels like I don't know how else to describe it except that it just feels very pushy, but it keeps you off center. As the other person, you just always feel a little bit off center. And you're like, depending on how empowered you are, you come back to your own center pretty easily. But the more often that someone's like pushing you off center, you're like, that just doesn't feel good. Because we could just both sit here and be fine. There's no need to be like
to do that. And it's like a disrespect of other people's boundaries.
that. Yes, thank you.
Like they can't gauge respecting you having a need different than what theirs is. It's like they're going to push theirs on you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a context for like where they end. They don't have
they want it their way.
Yeah, they don't have a point of reference of being able to say no. And so instead of in the healthy way of honoring, if I honor my limits, I'm probably going to be a little more sensitive to the fact that you have them too.
Yes.
And vice versa. If I'm pretty good at understanding that you have limits, it won't be a far jump for me to say, okay, I have limits too. And they're going to understand that I can't do this. And that's going to be a healthier exchange, as opposed to when you're operating from saying no as a power play. If I'm like pushing on you and you say no, I'm like, oh, I see what this is. I'm going to push harder. And that's absolutely not.
It's like they think it's cat and mouse, and it's like very violating, you know?
Yeah, it's not going to be comfortable. So, yeah. This idea that I know better than you. Oh, thank you.
It's all right. We've got technical difficulty.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what's. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
I know what is best for you more than you do. It's kind of that energy. Again, it's the control. You see, Courtney, this is a universal disgust sign. When someone does like scrunches their nose. Did you know that? It's the body language sign for
That's funny. I'm just getting some light in my eyes, but yeah, it is probably like
Well, either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you gonna say
I know what's best. You were gonna say.
I know what's best for you more than you do. I want to give this example, and I'm gonna remove identity, so it's just gonna be a story that you hear in an interaction of we'll say this, a woman going on a date with a man and him really wanting to be at her house. Like, I want to come over and hang out at your place. And she's like, I don't know that I'm really comfortable with that yet. Eventually, but maybe not yet. And then the response was, I don't know why you're being weird about this. Like, you've been to my place. I need to be at your place too. It seems like you're kind of following rigid rules. So I'd really like to come over to yours. It's like that energy of pushing versus going, oh, she's not ready for that yet. Okay, what could I do?
I wonder what she would need. Sorry, I didn't mean
That's exactly. I wonder what would make her more comfortable. I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
What would she need?
Let me see her. Versus like the push. I want how I want. And it sometimes almost feels like the more that they think they can't have it, the more vehemently they try to get what they want. Because internally it's that sense of like, I need to prove that I'm the dominant one. Like alpha, it's a dog eat dog world is kind of the underlying experience for them.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm seeing one more
tell me.
that I want to share. This is interesting because both of these energies are going to display this way. And so this is why we want to give some context to this, because you can be in your masculine energy just in general and expect respect. This one is where the breakdown is going to be viscerally different depending on which energy you're in. If you are in your healthy, empowered, integrated masculine energy, you do expect respect because you offer respect. It's the same thing of if I see my own limits, I can see yours. If I am respectful of you, then yes, it's healthy to expect that you would respect me too. if I'm coming from a wounded masculine camp and I'm expecting respect, it's like a demanding respect regardless. I don't actually respect you, but you should respect me.
Entitlement.
Yes, very much entitlement energy of you should respect me because we're back to hierarchy. Yeah, we're back to hierarchy because somewhere I'm higher than you. My title's higher than you. I make more than you. I'm smarter than you. I work harder than you. Whatever the thing is that that person is measuring in their mind, versus just saying, hey, I respect you, and therefore I'm only willing to sit at the table if you're willing to respect me back. If not, I'll leave. That's fine.
Well said.
Mm-hmm.
We can't forget this one.
Go for it.
Wounded masculine will feel irritated by or bothered by feminine energy. It's like chaotic. They can't pin it down. Her emotions are too much. You need to cool it. It's like an overwhelm to them. I would also say, candidly, I feel like wounded masculine really gravitates towards structure and rules very hard, very rigidly, versus healthy masculine's a little bit more flexible, like able to account for other points of view and context, things like that. I would say a little bit more reasonable, right? But wounded masculine is going to reject the feminine because it feels overwhelming to his system and maybe even a little foreign, because being in healthy masculine energy requires integration of feminine. So he will externally reject feminine energy, collective feminine energy. It might even be women at large, like his worldview, because he's not integrated with those parts on his own and isn't celebrating that on his own. And so when we talk about masculine and feminine, remember, this isn't gender based, this is energy based. So a man integrating his feminine energy looks like having empathy for other people, attuning to them and noticing the body language or what they might need, or holding space for emotion. It doesn't have to be the same expression that you might traditionally see in women. In fact, it will look very different. A man who's empowered and also embracing his feminine. So I just want to be really clear about that. I don't want you to hear that and think, what are they teaching? Like, what's going on here? It's masculine energy. No, you need that balance of being what we would say heart connected, heart led. And we were talking about this before the show. An empowered feminine woman will not be able to stay in a dynamic with a man who's not connected to his heart. She will feel lifeless, drained. It will be like shriveling. And I know, because I was with someone who was very wounded masculine for a long time before I did the healing work. That's why we're here. But it truly felt like becoming a raisin.
Yeah,
like
starving.
You starve, you shrivel up. I can't feel you. I don't feel connected. I'm out of touch with my sensuality, my playfulness, my warmth. You're in survival mode. It will suck the life out of you to not be able to connect with his heart. And the more empowered that woman is, the less time she will tolerate staying in that dynamic. It might be one date. It might be one message exchange before she's like, I can see this, and I don't want to be responsible for trying to get you to connect to it. I want someone who's already in that. We can have a felt shared experience and I can feel you. So wounded masculine is going to lack integration with being able to connect to his own emotions, his own inner experience, his own world, which is why he projects the rejection of it externally toward the collective feminine.
Come on.
That's all I got, actually.
That's it. That's it.
You always say, come on, when I'm like at the bottom of the barrel. She's like, come on. And I'm like, that's dry. I got nothing.
That's all she wrote.
Yeah.
No, I think that's so important, because they will say words like irrational, bothersome. There's a general vibe of being like bothered, irritated, or that they can't be bothered with things that are irrational. I love that you said that. It's very black and white in that we got some sun coming in. It has to be either or for them, for it to like make sense in their mind. They're like very, very celebrating the masculine, like rigidity to the detriment of being able to think critically, to be able to see the bigger perspective. And exactly what you're saying, they're going to project that rejection of their own emotions. They can't handle their own vulnerabilities, like we were saying earlier. That is how they're going to be interacting with other people. So brilliant.
Any final thoughts?
I think this is good. this, yeah, if you want more context, we have several other episodes about this, but hopefully this is kind of an update of our initial episode. I think it was 4 or 5, one of those. Because this is something that as we're learning and growing and finding more nuance, we're getting faster and faster at being able to identify this ourselves. And so we want to communicate how we do that so that you can make some healthier decisions too. So hopefully this was helpful for you.
Yeah, my invitation to you would be when you spot wounded masculine as a man, you have so much power to call other men forward. And what a gift it is to women. I know so many of you in the comments are doing that. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for calling men forward and helping them be healthier and helping them connect to their heart and getting out of this like dog eat dog alpha world and instead becoming these really grounded, empowered men. I know it's not easy. We have conversations with our friends, in our sisterhoods and female friendships where we call each other forward too. Court and I are often calling people out of this like being against men camp, because we want the healthy way forward. We love men. We want to celebrate the healthy goodness of men. You have so much power. You have no idea how much power you have to shift the men around you just by being a healthy man who watches content like this and cares about the impact you make in the world. I really appreciate you being here. I know Courtney really does too. And I am deeply touched by the comments that are supporting this work. And when you're saying you get it, and here's how you show up for people in your life, or, we've had great emails of men coming in like, I really want to understand, what does it mean to help a woman feel safe, seen, and heard? How can I help women feel more safe? I didn't realize that women didn't feel safe in the world. I love having these conversations with you. I just can't say thank you enough. It really means the world to me and the generations coming, the daughters we have, our daughters' daughters. It changes our family units. This work is so important. It's so big. It matters. And I am just so in admiration of you for doing it, because I know it's not easy, especially not in the climate where men are socialized to sometimes lean more wounded masculine. And I love that you're choosing healthy masculinity. I just feel very grateful. So share the show with someone you love if you think it can help them, please, as well.
I love that.
If you want more from us, we do have Instagram. You can find us there, the For the Love of Men podcast. You can follow Courtney _Shand. Mine is Building Bree Coaching on almost all platforms now. TikTok is Building Bree.
Nice.
That's it. Let us know what you think. We'll see you in the next episode.